does Marcellus Wallace look like?
What?
What country you from?
What?
What ain't no country I ever heard of? They speak English and what?
What?
English, motherfucker. Do you speak it?
Yes.
Then you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
Describe what Marcellus Wallace looks like.
What?
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time.
He's black.
Go on.
He's bald.
Does he look like a bitch?
What?
Does he look like a bitch?
No!
Then why you try to fuck him like a bitch, Brett? Yes, you did. Yes, you did, Brett. You tried to fuck him. And Marcellus Wallace don't like to be fucked by anybody except Mrs. Wallace. You read the Bible, Brett?
Yes.
Well, there's this passage I got memorized. Sort of fits this case. Ezekiel 25. The path of the righteous man is beset on both sides by the inequities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he who in the name of charity and goodwill shepherds the weak through the valley of darkness, for he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
That may be the best 3 minutes in cinematic history. Well, hello, Chris and Becky and Joan and Rose and Kathy and Rachel and Kathy. The kitty, I don't know. We haven't gotten test results back, so I can't really tell you about how the kitty is. I mean, she's the same as she was before she went to the vet. All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the Ezekiel 25:17, which is actually not an actual scripture. I know. Samuel Jackson recited it with great authority. And when I heard it, I thought, wow, that's some scripture there. But turns out it's not really scripture. Okay. All right. So welcome, everybody. Welcome, YouTube listeners. Welcome, Facebook listeners. And welcome. It's now 6:03 p.m. It is July 8th in the year of our Lord 2021. My name is Ken Goldberg. The name of the podcast is Ken Goldberg's Law Disorder. And I can't think of anything more law and disorder than Ezekiel 25:17. So let me tell you about the music theme tonight, because it's kind of the beginning of the show. I chose, I looked around for serious protest music that we would call contemporary. And Chris says, Scripture's not really scripture. I get that, yeah. I looked around for some contemporary protest songs. Things are getting really rotten in Texas. Really, really rotten in Texas. Texas is literally, potentially on the verge of collapse. If the power system goes down, economically, it will collapse. It'll be temporary. It will, of course, like the United States, economically will return. But why go through that? Why go through the hundreds of deaths that we experienced during the cold spell? Because the Republicans, led by Governor Abbott, have made a purposeful decision to ignore the problem and instead to focus on maintaining power. Not serving the public, maintaining power. Now, sometimes the two can be can travel alongside each other. Not in Texas, not in a lot of places. I'm not saying Texas is alone in this, but Texas is a really thirsty state for power. And many of my Republican friends here are convinced that the muscle of Texas, that we can pound everybody into submission. Well, the legislature's trying to pound liberals, women, gays, educators, um, liberals into submission. And they're doing a good job, frankly. I mean, if you don't know Texas, you should at least be aware. For instance, at one time, they wanted to, I don't know if she got on or not. They nominated a woman to the textbook board of the Board of Education, State Board of Education, who believed in, what do you call it? She believed that the earth was as old as only as Adam and Eve, right? God created the earth, what, a couple of thousand years ago? I can't. Creationism. And she wanted to purge textbooks of evolution. That's nuts. Okay? So, that's the kind of state Texas is. And Abbott is this, he sits in a wheelchair, which is almost kind of telling. He is mentally handicapped. And it's demonstrated by him sitting in this wheelchair because he could be walking, he would still be handicapped because he's a mental midget. He has so little brain power. He has so little creativity. He's just, I suspect, I don't know, that given that the last three governors never got above a C average in college and probably high school, there may be a mechanism behind the power structure of Texas that chooses these morons. George Bush, Rick Perry, Greg Abbott, these are mental midgets. And what they're doing right now in Texas, thank you, Ginny. I hope she didn't get approved, but she was supposed to get on there, wasn't she, right? So what happens is they've called a special session to finalize a rather extensive plan to deprive people who don't typically vote for them of any vote, and as a backup plan to deprive the Secretary of State, whether it would be a Republican or Democrat, who certifies the elections, they would be able to overturn it, just as Georgia's doing, Arizona's doing, Texas is doing. Now, Texas is the first one that will pass it since the Supreme Court did its ruling. These are voter suppression efforts. I get that they're going to do that. I actually don't really have the problem I'm having right now is I get that you're going to be working on voter suppression. You've made that clear for years. What really chafes my ass is that you have this looming large economic destructor called ERCOT power system. ERCOT is our management system for our power structure, who already told us in no uncertain terms that they were minutes away from a total failure of the power system, the system that delivers electricity and apparently gas to everybody in the state through one mechanism or another, that they were minutes away from complete catastrophe. Instead, what they did was they shut the system down for about 3 days, the bulk of the system. And people suffered. People died in terrible cold conditions. Now they have told us on a couple of occasions that if we don't turn our thermostats up during the heat wave, that the system may crash again. Now, if you were saying this to me for the first time, I'd say, well, let's get on this. I hope you're going to do something about it. What is just terrifying is that they've known about the power system, they've known its vulnerabilities, and they've refused to act. Now, why? I just have to assume that the politicians like Abbott and Paxton are in the pockets of some, shadow control group, that these guys are just puppets on a string. And in order to maintain the significant power that these persons have, they just buy these politicians and they orchestrate their elections, right? So here we are, voter suppressions swiftly moving forward. The power system, whatever you want to call it, is receding into the rearview mirror for them, not for me. I brought my anxiety right out of the cold spell, right into now. Okay, I'm still wondering. I mean, we actually thought this is how naive, especially liberals are. We thought that the way they got outed during the cold spell, we went around telling each other, well, they'll have to do something about it now. I mean, these guys just admitted that the system is incapable of functioning during difficult times. They just told you that. They didn't pretend because they couldn't pretend. I mean, pulled the covers off of that possibility, right? So there it was, exposed. And everybody said, Governor Abbott, what are you going to do about it? And he, banged his hand on the desk and said he was going to, represent the citizens of the state of Texas, and he was going to find out who was responsible. Well, apparently he was responsible for it, so screw him, right? All right. So I started looking. I mean, this is catching on. There's a tsunami of voter suppression going on across the United States right now. I named 3 states. I can name many more. The thing is that liberals seem to be incapable of rising to the occasion. So I was looking for protest songs, right? Something that said, we're not going to take it. And now I'm not the best researcher of music, but I wanted to make it a theme. All I could find really were songs that were put out by primarily Black artists about the Black experience. White people don't seem to have much capacity to generate protest, musically protest. The Beatles talked about Don't Do Revolution. And we sang that song and clapped our hands, okay? Didn't Abbott say a week ago that everything possibly done about the power grid? I didn't see that, Joan. And I absolutely, positively am positive that would be a lie. Unequivocally, without reading it, without knowing what they did, I would go on record and I'd put money on that bet that they didn't do shit. And that pretty much nothing was done about the power grid. Because what they did was they abdicated authority to moneyed interest. And does Greg Abbott sound like the kind of guy that stands up to moneyed interest? Or does he look like a puppet in a wheelchair who doesn't do anything? Now, Woody Guthrie might have been a good one, Mark. You can look at what I came up with. I just, Gil Scott-Heron, The Last Poets, and Public Enemy. I threw Kirk Franklin in because he's a gospel singer, a very famous gospel singer. He had a song called Revolution while I was researching, and I thought it was interesting, and I thought maybe it'll balance this out. But why, oh why are liberals incapable of harnessing anger, harnessing despair at this point? What is it in the nature of a liberal that just prohibits them from rising up angry and doing the things that need to be done to save a democracy, to save a country that we have all lived in? I have been a political activist a good portion of my adult life and my teenage life. You know, there was a time when I sat up in the alley on 57th Street and was putting gasoline in bottles with rags. You know, we were going to throw them at the police, right? Didn't do it, couldn't do it. But, you know, we talked about it, right? We were angry. We expressed anger constantly. We marched in downtown Chicago. Not once, many times. We rose up angry. Liberals, and I'm painting with a broad brush. I know this. Liberals seem to be incapacitated when it comes to actually standing up for themselves. It's not unlike, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, I would tell you. So in second grade, I'm playing tag with about, 10 kids. Not all my age, mostly older, actually. I was in second grade. I remember that. And I played with a group of guys that ranged in age probably from second grade to maybe eighth grade, right? And we had this big game of tag that we would play just before the bell rang for school to start. And I think maybe on recess or no, coming back from lunch. So one day, these three hoodlums, that's what we called them then, hoodlums came up and they were going to beat up this one kid who was as big as they were, bigger than me. And I turned to look at the kid. I saw the fear in his face. I looked at the other kids. Nobody was going to stand up. There was probably 8 or 10 of us. There were 3 of them, and it was obvious looking at the stairs that nobody was going to stand up for this kid. He looked afraid. Nobody was saying anything. This guy was calling them out, right? And, it was clear this kid didn't want to fight. So I said something, and and the guy told me to shut up, and I said some more. He told me, you say one more thing, and I did. And he snapped his finger, literally snapped his finger, and his little brother, about my size, immediately just jumped on me. Not a word was spoken at that point. I was in my first fight outside of my house, outside of my brother. I've seen this look repeated on the streets many times, not in the inner city, but in other streets. I see it politically on the faces of people all the time. There is coming a time when if we don't get angry, what will become? I just posted an article on Facebook about Joe Biden's kind of mealy-mouthed response to this Olympic athlete, being suspended for having consumed marijuana, which he concedes, everybody concedes, is not a performance-enhancing thing. I understand his position. Well, this is their rules. I don't have any control over their rules. That's not my objection. My objection is his mealy-mouthed expression of support or lack of support. He and Harris said during the campaign that they were going to make moves to legalize marijuana. They've done nothing. They haven't brought the subject up one time. Meantime, people continue to be arrested, taken into court, convicted, incarcerated for marijuana. I don't care if it's 5 ounces, 5 grams, 5 pounds, 500 pounds. Nobody should go and get locked up for marijuana. So I'm so sick of these politicians essentially just filling the chair and warding off the inevitable conservative wave that just keeps coming in, right? You wait for them in the seat of power to use the tools of power to push back the stimulus package, which people like to point out, well, look at the stimulus package. No, I'm not going to look at the stimulus package. I said it before. The reason I don't look at it is that was going to pass anyways. The Republicans already passed one. They knew they were going to have to pass another one. The fact that they didn't support the stimulus package was simply politics. It had nothing to do with anything. And if you watched CNN last night, they ran a whole thing about how O'Connell is telling his constituents in Kentucky how they're getting, I think it's $5 billion from the federal government. And he's saying, Kentucky, use it wisely. In other words, look what I'm bringing home. I'm bringing home the bacon. Well, he didn't bring home the bacon. He did the opposite. He objected to the bacon. So the stimulus package was going to pass one way or another. That's not the turning point on liberal versus conservative ideology. That was just saving our asses. What about saving our country? What about saving our right to vote? What about saving our infrastructure? What about saving our social infrastructure? What about talking, putting, and I mean, talking? I don't know if it's talking. I don't know, man. I'm no political maven, that's for sure, man. But I talked to a friend yesterday and this morning, and he's on Social Security disability. He's in his late 50s. He spent a good deal of his life in prison, and he needs oral surgery. Needs it. His tooth is falling apart, and the tooth must come out. He can't have a simple extraction, he explained to me, because the tooth is so fragile that if they yank it out, which would be relatively inexpensive, it would be crushed, and it wouldn't work. It has to be extracted by surgery, but he can't afford the surgery. So he has this infection raging in his body and no outlet. So then the trick becomes, well, if you're on disability, you are entitled to Medicaid and ultimately Medicare after so many years on Social Security, 2 years, right? So I say, well, why don't you get, your Medicaid to pay? And he says to me, well, because I know for a fact that they cover medical emergencies, although I'm not on it. I had kids on it in Arizona. Because in order for it to be declared a medical emergency, the dental people cannot do that. He has to go get a GP, have the GP declared a medical emergency, and then it has to be submitted to Medicaid or Medicare, I'm not sure which one he's on, for approval. Meantime, the infection's raging through his body. The guy's going nuts with pain. Why aren't the smartest people being paid to go out and sell the idea of healthcare? Why do we continue to have the same little harpies talking about? Why is all we got is Bernie Sanders and maybe Elizabeth Warren? Why don't the liberals harness the brains in the United States to come to their aid to design the types of public relation programs that, look what the Republicans have done with their programs. They have absolutely sold their people so much bullshit that we're on the verge of a civil war because they've been able to generate these lies into truth, and we can't get a truth into truth. We should be discouraged. Really, really, we should be discouraged. Should we stop fighting? No. But my concern is we're not fighting. We're really just kind of getting our teeth kicked in. Now, Ginny was here. I don't know if she's still here. Ginny is a local prominent Democrat who manages our local Democratic organization. And she has a fervor that I admire. And she puts me in check sometimes when I'm like, I'm just going to jump off a roof and, forget this. I'm moving to Costa Rica. I'm going to Thailand, whatever. I just get so discouraged. I'm too exasperated to get up anymore and be the one marching in the streets. I'm not going to the Million Man March. I'm not going to the Million Woman March. I did march here on the Million Woman March, or whatever they called it, that they had downtown. I actually showed up for that one. But in the main, I'm 68 years old. I don't go into crowds. Even if there was no pandemic, I don't go into crowds because it's too much. It's overstimulating. Yes, a couple of you pointed out that an infection like that can be fatal. And here's part B. I didn't tell you. It's relevant, but not relevant to my point, but relevant to his condition. So they were going to do something at a clinic where they were going to be able to provide him with low-cost service. Okay? And towards that end, money was secured to pay half the bill. I'm not going to get into who, what, or where that money came from. Problem is that as he sat there, they have to administer an anesthetic because it's going to be a cut. Okay? His blood pressure goes up so high, they can't do it in that moment. They can't do it. His blood pressure's too high. Those of you that know anything about anesthetic, you don't administer anesthetic to somebody whose blood pressure is 2 something, right? This guy is in physical peril from his heart, the blood pressure, from his infection. And yet, right now, he's home trying to figure out where he's going to get the surgery, who's going to perform the surgery, what the surgery is going to cost, and then ultimately, where will the funds come from? Okay? So why is this country have millions upon millions, tens of millions of people plagued with incomplete medical care? People that you know and that you love cannot access medical care for one reason or another. And because there is this myth, this fallacy that universal coverage is bad, which is wrong. It's a lie. But the powers that be have harnessed their PR mechanism to convince so many people in this country that somehow, if they had free medical care, it would be a disadvantage. That's almost like watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat, right? Da 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 da. So, and here's the common argument for those who have missed out. Well, your taxes will go up. Yes, they will. But right now, everybody who's got insurance, one way, shape, form, or another, is paying a premium. Some people think they're not paying a premium because it comes with their employment. They don't understand that the employer sits there and literally calculates in insurance when they're trying to decide how much money they're going to pay you. So if they know that they have to pay for health coverage, do you think they don't think to themselves, well, you know what? We can afford to pay $15 an hour, and then we're going to have to pay about another $3 an hour on average for health care. So we're paying this guy $18 an hour. That's what an employer thinks. They think this monies that I pay this person plus any benefits I must pay for and provide are coming out of my pocket. So that's how they decide who they're going, how much they're going to pay you. If you took that off their books, and this is the only country where that goes on, this is the only country where an employer does the health care premium, right? So just, throw out, I know most of you are smart and you already know that healthcare should be universal and that the tax rate for healthcare coverage would be lower than the premium cost of healthcare coverage, plus everybody would have access. All kinds of, how did you not know that Medicare the government's Medicare program has no authority to control pharmaceutical prices. They abdicated that responsibility. They will not allow people to go outside the system to get cheaper pharmaceuticals. They created all kinds of stories about contaminated drugs, not being able to get this guy. If you're the federal government, trust me, you can get medicines far cheaper than I can, right? In fact, Say hello to your COVID vaccination. So look how they were able, the powers that be, were able to put together a public relations program, a campaign, I should say, that convinced so many Americans that having good health coverage was anathema to them. And yet, I watch the liberals, and they throw Bernie under the bus when he goes out on the limb and talks about these things. The Democrats allowed him to be thrown under the bus. They also helped denigrate him. They also treat him like he was a communist. And so he was out of the running. And we got this crazy lady, Hillary Clinton. I voted for her, but she's a crazy lady. So where is our anger? Where is our opportunity to rise up angry? Why is it take, Mark mentioned Woody Guthrie. Woody Guthrie was a good example, and I'm sorry I missed some of his music to put on here today. That would have been smart. But in the main, music of revolution, lyrics of revolution tend to originate with people of color. And partly that's because they know oppression longer and better, but it's also because liberals don't have any words for anger. And I say that, satirically a little bit, but in the main, they really don't. I sit with liberals all the time. They don't know how to fight back. They just don't. And we see some examples of people that are bright and hard at work, like Stacey Abrams and my friend Ginny, and you got this Latina women's cooperative in Maricopa County that generated lots of Hispanic votes for Biden, but it's not enough. It's not enough. It's not a movement. That's not a movement. The Vietnam War was in large measure brought to a halt by a movement. It's the last time we saw liberals act, right? And the reason they acted as vehemently, as vigorously as they did, historically, is because their children were going to war and getting killed. When there was a draft, but there were exemptions, the middle class was fairly quiet about the war. There was some resistance, but it wasn't until they created a lottery system where they eliminated college as an exemption, because people with money could send their kids to college, even a crappy college like Parsons College in Iowa. Remember that one? Any kid could get in if he could pay. They eliminated getting married then, okay? Because you could get married after they got rid of the college one. They wouldn't take married people. Then when they would take married people, they said, well, if you have a kid, well, so all of a sudden we had a lot of white middle-class kids being born, right? And then they eliminated all of it and said, everybody, we're going to have this equal system. Everybody who reaches the age of 18 will be enrolled for conscription, and everybody, it'll just depend on your number. And even then, I got number one. I should have been in Vietnam if all things were equal. I didn't go to Vietnam. How come? Because my family could afford a psychiatrist who was opposed to the war in Vietnam, who knew how crazy I was and was able to articulate in a letter to the government just how crazy I was and why I would be a bad soldier. Lots of people would have made bad soldiers. Lots of people were as crazy as me went over to Vietnam. And those that weren't crazy on the way over were crazy on the way back. So I knew I was lucky that I had a family. There was a young black man sitting next to me waiting to see the psychiatrist. And I said, what's the deal with you? He said, I don't know. They asked me a couple of questions, told me to get in this line. I got in that line to see a psychiatrist because I had a letter from the Psychiatric and Psychosomatic Institute at Michael Reese Hospital. The director had written it. So now I'm in that line. He went first. He went in the office with psychiatrist, went out another door, called me in. I went in, spent some time with them. They told me goodbye. and you'll find out what the deal is. So I go out that door, and there he is. He's waiting. I said, so what happened? They asked me if I was a homosexual. I told them no. He said, okay, that was it. I was asked numerous questions about, do I have friends and da-da-da-da-da-dum, right? I mean, what was the real difference between me and that 18-year-old kid? I was an 18-year-old kid. What was the difference between us? We both saw a psychiatrist, and he said, almost no time at all. And I had time enough to get a 1Y, which meant that I was going to be temporarily incapable of serving in the United States military. And subsequently, I was reissued a 4F, which meant I was permanently incapable of being drafted in the military. A 1Y was subject to review every 6 months. As it was, the war was going to wind down because taking white middle-class kids became a real sore spot for America, and they really put up the heat on Nixon, and the war began to wind down and come to an end. So I don't know. That's the last time liberals seem to really get harnessed. Since then, show me, you can't, where we have been able to put up significant resistance to conservative ideologies and implementation of those ideologies. We have been fighting a losing battle. Planned Parenthood is defunded in the state of Texas. I don't know about other states. Even when they were busy providing non-abortion services, the very fact that they were associated with abortion anywhere was enough for the politicians. There were enough politicians in our legislature to defund, to cease any and all funds, government funds, to Planned Parenthood. That's the tip of the iceberg to what goes on in Texas. It's the tip of the iceberg to what goes on in Arizona and Florida and Mississippi and Alabama. Why are all the liberal states up north? Wait, somebody please explain to me what it is about cold weather and liberals that seems to go hand in hand. How come when I think, oh man, I'm going to blow this pop stand, I want to move to a state with a liberal governor, closest I can get is Colorado. Colorado has a long winter, man. I'm not down with cold. Chris and I were talking the other day. He said, if I had known you were going out when it was 91 degrees at noontime, I'd have joined you. I'm like, what? It was a stupid idea on my part. Why would you do something stupid? He said, I just hate cold. He embraces the warmth. I embrace hot weather too, but not after a while. Anyways, I digress. I'm disturbed. I'm disturbed because my local politics and my local politicians are disturbing. And I'm disturbed because on a national level, that I hope there's no misunderstanding here. The Democrats are not moving an agenda forward. They're exactly where they were a month or two ago. Nothing they have proposed has passed. Nothing they have proposed or promised has moved forward. There were some House bills. Under Obama, there were hundreds of House bills passed that were never approved by the Senate. This is the same old shit. SOS. We need to somehow invigorate the young, and I don't know how. I'm not saying I got an answer. I'm just saying it's clear to me, and it should be clear to all of us that there's a failure to rebel. There's a failure to rise to the revolution. There are people that get it. The music gets it. Woody Guthrie probably got it. I haven't listened to him lately. The Last Poets got it. You dig what I'm saying? Grandmaster Flash got it. Gil Scott Heron, he had it. He understood it, okay? So, and Public Enemy got it. There's a theme. There's a commonality, right, to this. It's overwhelmingly people of color. And one of Woody Guthrie's particular affinities was his understanding of, one, the working man and the working man of color. Okay? He was sensitive to this. We seem to not be as sensitive except when we're sitting around having a cup of coffee and saying, ain't it a shame? Ain't it a shame? Wow. I mean, doesn't that chafe you? Huh? All right. So you're all wondering about my chafe. Yes, I rode a bicycle for 4 days in a row. And for the first time ever, I've got something which I believe is associated with my bicycle saddle, right? Never had that. And I've ridden hundreds and hundreds, thousands and thousands of miles. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Becky, for allowing Chris to take a picture of my wound, because I hope Chris would testify, so to speak, that it was not in a spot I was going to get a picture of. He was helpful. I think I'm going to send it to my doctor tonight and say, because it's really painful. So I didn't ride a bike today. I sat home and I felt like a slug. I didn't know what to do. My ass hurts. It literally hurts, man. Hurts when I'm laying down, hurts when I'm sitting up. I thought, well, I'll go to a movie, because if I'm not going to go, but the movie's over. The close movie's not on until tonight. The other one's closed down still. The other one's $10 for a matinee. Whatever it is, I'll end up sitting home and watching the Tour de France. The Tour de France. All right. So I think I've said enough. It's 6:42. I'm going to beat Chris to the punch where he's going to say something about meta, right? And but we need to ease into that meditation, that reflection, that meta, that love and compassion.
Of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he who in the name of charity and goodwill shepherds the weak through the valley of darkness, for he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
God, I can't watch that enough. Yeah, I've kind of moved on from the mouth thing, but I hope you all get better. Those of you that also have your own mouth issues or sweat issues, whatever it is, my heart goes out to you. In the meantime, as my heart goes out to you, a perfect segue into metta. My hands before my heart, my head is bowed, my eyes are closed. I take a deep breath. And I say, may I be happy, healthy, free from harm, free from anger, anxiety, and fear. May this practice lead to a life of greater peace and comfort. And may my mother and father, all my family members and friends, be happy, healthy, and free from harm. May they also find the path that leads them to greater peace and comfort. And to those persons that I harbor ill will towards, be it Republicans, conservatives, right-wing, white supremacists, people I just don't like, in this moment, I really will suspend all judgment, thus that I am able to send out, without reservation, goodwill, that these persons be happy, healthy, free from harm, living lives in peace, comfort, joy, and to all living beings, wherever they are, all humans and non-humans, be happy, healthy, free from harm, able to live lives and safety, comfort, and peace. Satu, Satu, Satu. You're welcome, Joan and Rachel, and I guess Ginny probably split. I see a lot of people left. I probably tiraded too long about politics. That seems to turn a lot of people off, but what am I gonna do, man? I mean, it's that kind of environment. Chris and Becky, Joan, Kathy, Rose, Rachel, Mark, and Ann, anybody that may have been hiding in the woods. You are loved. Now rise up angry. Listen to the music. Check you guys later. Tomorrow, in fact. Good night.